Sam Cosmi said it himself. If he played this game exactly how his instincts tell him to, he'd be locked up right now. Stick with me for a minute because I'm about to break down why that confession might be the best news this O-line has gotten in years, and why it's also raising a real question nobody in the DMV wants to say out loud. Because that same nasty streak Cosmi's been promising since draft day is exactly what's gotta protect Ashburn's franchise piece, Jaden Daniels, who ESPN just named the Commanders' biggest strength heading into 2026. But don't go anywhere because that headline is hiding an uncomfortable question that could shape this whole season. And while all that's cooking, straight from Ashburn, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn already dropped the first injury report of camp, with a couple names Burgundy and Gold Nation needs to keep an eye on before the real hits start flying. Stay locked in because we're riding this one all the way through. Raise hail. Alright, let's talk about Sam Cosmi with the seriousness this deserves, because I have been waiting for this story for days, and I finally get to break it down properly. The headline that dropped this week says essentially that if Cosmi did what he actually wants to do on the field, he would end up behind bars. Listen closely, that is not some throwaway line from a random player hyping up camp. Coming from Cosmi, that line has history behind it, and that history is exactly what I want to dig into, because that is where the real analysis lives. Let's rewind first to draft day back in 2021. A much younger Cosmi, freshly picked in the second round by Washington, described himself as a mauler and made a simple promise. If someone beat him once, he would never let it happen again. That mentality did not start this week. It has been brewing for 5 years. And in September of 2024, when the Commanders signed him to a 4-year, $74 million extension with $45 million guaranteed, Cosmi raised the volume again. He said he was going to be dirty, he was going to be nasty, and he was not going to take anything from anybody every time he stepped on that field. What is happening now with this new comment about being behind bars if he did what he really wants is the exact continuation of that same idea, just said with more edge. Because Cosmi is walking into this training camp completely healthy for the first time in 2 years, and bro, that changes everything. Let's get into the facts, because this is where I want you to understand the real scale of what is happening. Cosmi enters 2026 after an injury stretch that would have ended a lot of players' careers. Honestly, players with less character than him. In the divisional round of the playoffs following the 2024 season against Detroit, he tore his ACL. He missed the conference championship the following week. He spent 9 months in rehab, and he later said the first month he could not even sleep, that he would lie awake in his basement processing what had happened to his knee. He returned to action in week 7 of the 2025 season against Dallas, and in those first 2 games back, he allowed 7 pressures and 2 sacks, numbers you would expect from a guy still shaking off rust after major surgery. But from there through the rest of the season, he allowed just 4 combined pressures and 0 sacks. 0. Those numbers do not describe a player still bouncing back from surgery. They describe an elite player who was just getting warmed up. And right as he was finding that rhythm in December, a concussion sent him back to injured reserve and closed out his 2025 season after just 9 games played. His teammates voted him the winner of the Ed Block Courage Award that same season, an honor given to the player who overcame real physical adversity. And honestly, looking at the road he walked, I think he earned every bit of it. Now here is where my actual analysis comes in, because I do not want to stay stuck in the emotional storyline. According to Pro Football Focus, in 2024, the last full season Cosmi played before all of this, he finished with a grade of 80.6 over 1,103 snaps, allowing just 1 sack the entire season. 1 sack, playing right guard after being converted from tackle back in 2023. That is a level of consistency very few interior linemen in the NFL reach, and it is exactly why Hogs Haven ranked him number 7 on their 2026 roster ranking, with the honest note that the spot is probably too low. Bleacher Report, through a recent Rant Sports piece, named him one of the NFL's best kept secrets heading into this season. And look, I get why. When a player spends half of last season on the bench with an injury, the league at large forgets he exists. But the talent is still there, untouched. And this ties directly into what is happening across this offensive line heading into 2026, because context matters a lot here. Washington enters this training camp with Laramie Tunsil, the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL, protecting the left side, and Josh Connerly Jr. on the other side after a much stronger second half of the season than his rookie start. At center, there is a real battle between Nick Allegretti, brought in to replace Tyler Biadasz, and Matt Golban, a lineman with a natural nastiness the staff valued a lot in the evaluation process, though everything points to Allegretti holding the edge right now because of his leadership. And at left guard, Chris Paul and Brandon Coleman are fighting for the starting job again, the same battle as last year, where Paul won the job early and developed good chemistry with Tunsil, while Coleman, more athletic and better in the screen game, lost most of that competition to injuries. Washington is going to run a zone blocking scheme in 2026, a scheme that demands exactly the kind of athleticism Tunsil, Connerly, COSMI, and Coleman all have, because in zone blocking the guards have to move, read the defender on the fly, and sometimes pull to the opposite side in a split second. That scheme rewards precisely the controlled aggression COSMI has been describing since his draft day. Yahoo Sports projected them as a borderline top 10 unit by mid-season, as long as health cooperates. And there it is, fam, the key word, health. And here I want to be blunt about an outside critique I find lazy. Several league rankings put this offensive line among the 10 worst heading into 2026. With all due respect, I do not buy that read. That kind of ranking usually looks at names on paper without real context, and here the context matters. Connerly played considerably better in the second half of his rookie year than in his start. Allegretti is not a real drop-off from Biadasz in strength, even if he loses some athleticism. And COSMI, when healthy, played like one of the best guards in the whole conference. Ignoring that, just to keep the easy image of a weak line strikes me as lazy analysis, and I would rather stick with the concrete PFF numbers than a generic ranking with no real breakdown. We also have to give credit to the front office's quiet work on this front. Andrew Wiley, versatile between tackle and guard, remains on the roster as exactly the insurance policy this line needs if something happens again. That is pure planning from Adam Peters, not luck. And with Trent Scott and Foster Sarell also competing for depth along the line, Washington, for the first time in years, walks into a training camp without depending on a single healthy body to hold up the entire offensive front. Because, let me be honest with you, because this is what almost nobody is discussing out loud. And to me, it is the most important question of all. COSMI is 27 years old. He has 58 career starts over 5 seasons. And in just 2 years, he suffered 2 separate serious injuries, a torn ACL and a concussion. His playing style, the dirty, nasty style he chose himself and takes so much pride in, depends entirely on playing with a level of physical aggression that honestly is exactly the kind of style that historically wears down a lineman's body faster. I am not saying COSMI is going to get hurt again. I am saying that risk is real, and ignoring it just because we want the nice, heroic comeback narrative would be a real analytical mistake. I could be wrong, and honestly, I hope I am, but for me, that is the real elephant in the room of this whole story. With all that said, my personal take is this. If COSMI makes it to week 1 healthy and holds on to that 80.6 grade level he had before the injuries, this offensive line stops being a question mark and becomes one of the real strengths of this roster. And I say that while being critical of the front office in other areas, but here Adam Peters got it right. Locking COSMI up with that extension in 2024, instead of letting him walk into the open market, is a decision that looks smarter every year. COSMI's dark confession, the one about ending up behind bars if he did what he really wants, sounds like a threat, but it is actually a promise. If the body holds up, this line is going to play with a physical identity Washington has not had in years. And that identity, bro, is exactly what a team trying to get back to fighting in January needs. We are going to track camp day by day to see whether the staff manages his reps carefully in the early weeks, because that will be the most honest signal of how worried Dan Quinn really is about the physical toll on his star guard. Okay, bro, I needed that offensive line breather, but now let's talk about something that sparks a different kind of debate, because ESPN named Jaden Daniels the biggest strength of the Commanders heading into 2026 again. And yes, I already know what you are thinking. That does not sound like fresh news, even the most casual fan knows that already, and you are partly right. But I want to go one step past the obvious here, because there is an uncomfortable question hiding behind that headline that is worth putting on the table. Let's go over why Daniels earned that spot. As a rookie in 2024, he threw for 3,568 yards with 25 touchdowns, added 891 rushing yards with 6 more scores on the ground, took home Offensive Rookie of the Year. and led a team that had won just 4 games the year before all the way to the conference championship. A rival coach, without being named directly, summed it up perfectly to ESPN when he said Daniels makes a lot of wrongs right. That phrase to me describes exactly what makes this quarterback special. His ability to extend plays with his legs when protection breaks down, and to keep making smart decisions even while running for his life. You cannot coach that. You either have it or you do not. But 2025 was a truly hard year, and we have to say that with the same honesty we celebrated 2024 with. The team finished 5-12, injuries hit hard, and Daniels himself was part of that story of setbacks. Daniels described it himself as a season that left, in his words, a bitter taste in his mouth. And here's where I want to raise the uncomfortable question almost nobody is asking out loud. How healthy is it from a roster building standpoint for the entire identity of the Commanders to keep depending this much on one third-year player? Look, this question points more at the roster's balance than at Daniels himself. When your franchise's biggest strength is always the same name, year after year, that is also a sign the other pieces have not fully matured enough to share that responsibility yet. The good news, and this actually has me optimistic, is that the front office seems to have gotten the message. Adam Peters handed out $159 million in guaranteed money in free agency this offseason, with the explicit goal of strengthening both lines of scrimmage. Cliff Kingsbury stays on as offensive coordinator, and now Daniels is going to play more snaps under center than he did in his first season, which tactically gives him added formation variety: wide zone, inside zone, mid zone, all from shotgun and now from under center too. That scheme evolution to me is proof that Kingsbury is trying to build an offense that does not fully collapse if Daniels misses a game or two. And on the other side of the ball, the switch to defensive coordinator Durante Jones points in that same direction. If the defense can win the turnover battle and cut down points allowed, the offense stops needing Daniels to solve every single drive with a hero play. And if we look for a mirror around the league, we do not have to look far. Baltimore went through something similar with Lamar Jackson a few years back, and the fix was never to move the offense away from Jackson as the centerpiece. It was building a stronger offensive line and a running back room that could take some of the physical load off him week to week. Washington looks like it is copying that exact playbook with Daniels, and to me, that is the right one. My personal take, being direct about it, yes, depending this much on Daniels is scary, and it would be naive not to admit that after a season where the injuries exposed exactly that fragility. But I also think it is the right kind of dependence. This kid already proved in his rookie year that he can carry this team to a conference championship. The real priority for 2026 is not reducing the dependence on Daniels. It is building enough depth around him so that when the season punches back, like it always does in the NFL, the whole team does not collapse with him. And with the offensive line we just broke down, plus the free agency investments, I think we are heading in the right direction. And to close things out, something quick but necessary, because you always have to keep the medical radar on before contact practices start. At the pre-camp press conference, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn confirmed a couple of updates. Punter Tress Way, the longest tenured player in the organization, has a pectoral injury and will not practice in the early days. Peters was clear that this is not expected to keep him out long, and as an immediate stopgap, Washington signed veteran Matt Hack, who averaged 51.3 yards per punt with Arizona last season. The other name to watch is linebacker Kane Medrano, dealing with a hamstring injury suffered in offseason training, also labeled minor. With special teams ace Nick Bellore retiring, Medrano was projected to inherit a lot of those snaps, so it will be worth watching how quickly he returns. On top of that, 3 players are starting camp on the physically unable to perform list. Cornerback Trey Amos, who was coming off a promising rookie season through his first 10 games before dealing with soft tissue soreness, and defensive ends Dorrance Armstrong and Dietrich Wise Jr. None of them have a public return date yet, but Quinn said Armstrong is, in his words, super close to being activated. None of this changes the team's bigger plans for 2026, and honestly, I would take this kind of boring medical update in July over a serious one in October any day. With Rasul Douglas signed as veteran cornerback depth, the Amos PP situation feels manageable, and on a roster trying to fight in January, that is exactly the kind of cushion you want in place before the real hits start coming. And with that, we wrap up the first real day of content from this training camp, fam. Cosmi gave us the quote of the day, and hopefully the people saying his fully healthy return can take this offensive line to another level are right, because if that happens, this offense is going to be legitimately scary. Daniels remains, officially and unofficially, the heartbeat of this whole project, and that responsibility needs to keep getting surrounded with pieces that can support it. And today's injuries are, thank goodness, just background noise, not a real alarm. This season has every look of being different, and I want y'all to believe that with me. If this video gave you something, drop a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments below, do you trust COSMI to hold up all 17 weeks this time? I want to read every single answer. See you in the next one.